It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
That spin class was brutal. Well, you can try using the Buick's massaging seat. Ooh, yeah, that's nice.
Can I use Apple CarPlay to put some music on?
Sure, it's wireless.
Pick something we all like. Okay, hold on. What's your Buick's Wi-Fi password?
Buick Envision 2021.
Oh, you should pick something stronger. That's really predictable.
That's a really tight spot. Don't worry, I used to hate parallel parking.
Me too.
Hey.
Really outdid yourself.
Yes, we did.
The all-new Buick Envision, an SUV built around you, all of you.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Nope. Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Maureen is...
We going for an hour?
Yeah. Welcome to another edition of the BCSN SportsWrap. I'm here today. This is AD Drew. My partner Brian Fulford is, as Doc likes to say, out on assignment. I'll tell the truth. He's MIA. No, seriously though. He had something come up at the last minute, so I had to make a call to the good Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, asked him to pinch hit for my partner Brian. And guys also have to excuse me. My voice is a little bit froggy today, but we gonna get through this abbreviated edition of the BCSN SportsWrap. So, Doc, how you doing? Have you recovered yet? I know you was running on fumes this morning. Were you able to get that nap in after your show this morning?
No, I have a 7-year-old. No such thing as a naps.
you know, back in the day.
You remember those days, right?
I remember those days, and I got grands that I have to deal with, but I can send them home to their mama.
That's the key. See, I can't do that. I can't do that.
You know, back in the day, that's when parents used to give you NyQuil or give you those other concoctions that make you fall asleep a little bit early back in the day. But you can't do that kind of stuff now. They might call it child abuse.
Sure will. You got to be careful with that.
Exactly. Hey, before we go any further, I want everybody to stop what you're doing right now. Like, subscribe, share, donate, and download. Download our app, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. There's my JBN / my BCSN, either one you search for. You download it, you'll get not only the BCSN Sports Wrap, but Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, Knights of the Round Table, Carlos Brown Show, Inside HBCU Football, which follows us behind this show. You'll get the whole gamut of the BCSN family. Also, go to your favorite listening service, Spotify, Amazon Music, whatever. Download the BCSN Pod Zone. You will get the audio version of all of our podcasts available right there for your listening pleasure. Now that we got all that stuff out the way, Doc, let's get into the business of today and while we are here on this abbreviated version. They had this little small game that went on yesterday. Only 50,000 people decided to show up for this game. I'm a little disappointed we weren't able to catch the SEC attendance, but 50,000 is 50,000 no matter how you put it together. And a champion was crowned. That champion being the Jackson State Tigers. Now, when we go back to the spring, Jackson State was one of those teams that was they were pretty much a 500 team back in the spring. They were able to springboard that spring into a good fall. Prairie View finished one game out in the spring and were able to take that and springboard that into a championship game appearance here this fall. So before we go into the numbers from yesterday's game, Doc, what do you think about now, since we've had a full fall season, about spring football and the spring fall debate we were having back in July and August about whether it was good that they played in the spring, whether it was bad that they played in the spring? Just your thoughts in general on that.
I think there's like three ways at a minimum that you can look at the spring season. You know, you can look at it in terms, I'm going to talk about it most importantly in regards to the college athletes. You know, how did it affect them? And even when you do that, you have to break that down in a couple of ways. Emotionally, I think it was positive for the students. They had taken a long way off. The chance that we talk about the psychological aspects of COVID-19 health related. You know, you did a show on that. We did a show on that on Inside the HBCU. So we know that there's some merits in terms of how COVID-19 psychologically affected all of us, particularly young people, to a certain degree that, you know, suicides had increased. And so I think from that perspective alone, it was important to provide a sense of family, a sense of direction, a sense of opportunity. From a physical aspect, I think there are some legitimate arguments about people who are concerned and just how much wear and tear were on these athletes' bodies. I think that is certainly a fair assessment that should be reviewed and something that we all need to be cognizant of and consider. The third one was in terms of I'm gonna call it a branding component. Particularly in this case, it was the SWAC that mostly had essentially all teams at that time, 10-member conference before FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. While they were ratified to come in, they didn't start the season to this fall. So you had the 9 of the 10 teams, Alcorn opted out for their own reason. And so for the branding opportunity, I think it was a significant boom of what we saw take place this fall. Branding economically, I think it gave a framework and an opportunity for those that may not have known about HBCUs a chance to do a second look and pivot. And some of these folks have stayed with HBCUs, understanding the significance of the culture, what I call the sporting HBCU diaspora. Now, there's the good and bad to that. That means that you can be exploited for your financial components of it. So you got to be prepared to generate the revenue and to some degree keep it on your own. Or
that. Expected to see possibly some torn ACLs or other overuse injuries that we tend to see. And I don't have the data in front of me, don't have any science in front of me to back this statement up, but it did not seem that those type of injuries were up any more than they were in any other season. I think at the beginning of the season in September, you had a lot of injuries from the bodies, the teams that did not play in the spring, from their bodies not being used to that pounding and, getting those hits. And you have to get used to those hits again. I think those were the injuries that we saw back in September versus what I think we would have seen in late October, November, when I think we would have seen, okay, there's a torn hamstring, there's that ACL because they've played so many downs and taken so many hits over a calendar year. Did not see that. And I don't know if you noticed that any different for where you were sitting at, Doc, did you?
No, I really didn't. I think you bring up a great point in terms of the potential for more injuries. And when I was talking about the health aspect physically on the body that I was referencing, and you're right, I'd like to take a little deeper dive, but from a peripheral view of what I've seen, I haven't noticed a significant more amount of injuries compared to what I've seen traditionally in a contact sport such as football, year in, year out.
Yeah. And the other thing was, though, you talk about the SWAC. The SWAC was able to do something special in the spring as they were able to get out and go from barely being on ESPN3 to being prime time on the linear network, ESPN and ESPN2, which pushed interest to the SWAC, which got them more opportunities to play on the linear network in the fall. And Dr. McClellan and all those at the SWAC office have leveraged those relationships and those viewers into hopefully some bigger and brighter things for the conferences. We've seen some things come along as far as sponsorships that those opportunities were not there before this spring season. And those opportunities have continued on into the fall season. So let's see where those opportunities come into 2022, 2023, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree very much. That's why I was talking about the branding, but I like the way that you moved over and tied branding into the specific sponsorship opportunities and how that also tied into the television broadcasting opportunities and how that has increased in terms of the number of games that are shown even on the streaming platform, but also moving up the dial in terms of the linear platform. We saw yesterday, for example, the SWAC championship game, which is traditionally on ESPNU, moved to ESPN2. A lot of that recognition, obviously, I'm sure Coach Prime being a part of Jackson State and having his team in that position helped with that. But generally, you've seen that across the board that you're seeing more updates and more opportunities to see SWAC teams throughout the year. You've seen it move up, like you said, up the linear stations, essentially ESPN U to ESPN2, which is significant. And so that's a fascinating component of seeing how you move that forward. I certainly know from my dialogue with the commissioner, Dr. Charles McCullen, that his goal is to get more games on linear networks, whether that's ESPN or potentially maybe some other opportunities if some other networks are interested. Obviously, the contractual arrangement in terms of what they have with ESPN has to be reviewed and looked at. I don't know the intimate details of that, but I understood that there were some opportunities that potentially could provide other opportunities to broadcast games, not just on ESPN or the ESPN family of networks. So that's fascinating to look at to see what that looks like. And that becomes significant. When you talk about brand awareness that I was talking about earlier, the more opportunity that you can put your institutions out in front of the landscape for those that potentially, you're talking about the increase in enrollments, which we know is significant in terms of financing, not just the university, particularly athletics, Sponsorships are attached to you because now you have more opportunity for them to show their products to many individuals that may be likely to purchase them. And then when you're talking about also the ability to create the brand awareness of your marketing product across these landscapes become extremely important as well.
You talk about network opportunities. CBS has lost the SEC contract. I'm just throwing it out there, CBS. Hey, same footprint. I'm just saying, no, but
good point.
But seriously, all right, let's get into the game before we start some mess that we can't get ourselves out of. This is AD Drew pitch hitting for me today. My host Brian is not here today. I get to move over to the big chair, so I get to put Dr. Cavil in the small chair. That don't happen too often to Dr. Cavil. He's usually the one in the big chair.
I see you putting me to work. I appreciate
it. Got you earned that degree, but now I'm gonna make you put it to work.
Let's go.
All right, let's get into this game, Dr. Cavil. On the surface, looks like that it was a dominating performance by Jackson State, as Jackson State won the game 27-10. But I've really had an opportunity to go deeper inside the numbers. Number one, you have got to give Prairie View A&M's defense all the credit in the world. The defense gave up only 13 points. Let me say that again. The defense only gave up 13 points. Jackson State's other 2 touchdowns, one came on special teams, one came on a pick 6 by the offense. So you got to give Prairie View's defense all the credit in the world. Number 2.
I would say this, just to jump in, the other scores that you speak of, that those scores that were scored on the defense were also a byproduct of the offense of Prairie View putting them in bad positions in terms of deepening territory. So I wanted to put that on the table to even maximize in terms of what you're saying about how well the defense of Prairie View played.
And that was just the point I was getting ready to get at. But as good as that defense was, Dr. Cavil, Prairie View's offense was that bad. Their lone touchdown came on a bit of trickeration as they with the double pass in the first quarter to take that 7-0 lead. But looking at the numbers, Prairie View 14 first downs, Jackson State 16 first down. Rushing yards, Prairie View 100, Jackson State 148. Passing yards, Prairie View 130, Jackson State 85. Total yards, Prairie View 230, Jackson State 233. Even plays run, Prairie View 65, Jackson State 60. Average yards per play, Prairie View 3.5, Jackson State 3.9. I'm not gonna say neither offense was that bad or were both defenses that good. That's a debate that you can have when you look at these numbers. The difference in the game was the turnovers. Prairie View turned the ball over 3 times in the game. 3 turnovers. That was the difference in the game when you look at it. Your thoughts on that analysis of the game, Doc?
I think you're spot on. When you break it down, it was obvious to me that the 2 defenses played really well. They were schematically prepared to stop the respective offenses that they were up against. And you're talking about offenses that had played pretty well for most of the season, particularly with the play of the quarterback, the ability to run the ball. Prairie View ran for an average of 2.6. Well, you say, well, what did Jackson State do? They were just a tad better, but they are at 3.4 yards a play. And so it tells you to me that the defenses were able to do what they want against those offensive lines. They controlled the line of scrimmage. And the difference came on those turnovers in big plays. Prairie View had 5 turnovers, 3 interceptions, but 5 turnovers to Jackson State's 1 turnover. As much as we've watched football, coach different sports and that nature, it is challenging to beat a team with 5 turnovers. But you're talking about in a championship game, which means that you're playing, in most cases, a really good team, at least a good team. In this case, I think you have to argue that Jackson State is a really good, if not great team. And it's just a challenge to beat a team like that, especially when it's your quarterback, the lead person that you want. One thing that you can say about Shador is the fact, while he didn't necessarily have his best game, he was 8 of 16. This is somebody that passes oftentimes for 70% efficiency. So, and there he was 50%. So well below his average, only throwing for 85 yards. So, but what he didn't do, he only had the 1 interception. He had a chance to throw 2 because it could have been a pick 6 in that game, which would have been different, and seeing how that played up, which is still another case of the defense playing well. Jackson State got the pick 6, if you would, on their side. Prairie View didn't, which shows you a little difference in this game. Third down efficiency is another case. Prairie View was 4 of 15, but Jackson State was just 3 of 12. They had to go some of these teams decided to go on 4th down. Prairie View was able to convert twice, 2 and 2, but still lets you know how stingy the defense was when you're trying to travel the length of the field. And I think in a lot of ways that was the difference in the game. Which defense could better set up their offense not to have to go the length of the field, because both teams basically showed that the defenses were not going to do it. And in fact, that's what Jackson State scored on when they had the short field, is what I talked about a little earlier. So I think you give credit out to Jackson State. I think Jackson State showed that they were more consistent over the whole year about finding different ways to be successful on the field, particularly when their offense wasn't necessarily doing the things they want. But in some ways, and I know we might get to this, it makes for at least a plausible argument in the MEAC Challenge game with South Carolina State coming in at 6-5, that it's not necessarily a far-going conclusion that Jackson State is going to get it done. You have to obviously pick them as a favorite. You would think they're going to get it done, and I think most likely they will get it done. But I think there is a puncher's chance for South Carolina State, which still makes this pretty interesting in terms of what happens there. Can they do a similar thing that Prairie View was able to do, or FAMU for that matter, in terms on the defensive side of the ball? There's some questions about that. South Carolina State is not the traditional tough defense that we're used to having from them. They've been able to win more games from an offensive perspective, but they played a pretty tough schedule this year, so they are certainly seasoned from seeing talented teams. They have the benefit of having more time off, meaning they're going to rest the body, and they have more times to dissect and see some things in terms of what they may do for themselves about creating plays. They get the quarterback that was nicked up a little bit, that didn't play against Norfolk State, did not end the North Carolina A&T game where they were leading and fighting hard and in some ways dominating that game until he left. Credit to North Carolina A&T, they came back. But so this is a team, if you're not careful, they lost to Alabama A&M last second, that this is a team that a couple of plays here and there, and they could have 2 or 3 more wins on their schedule. So instead of looking at 6-5, you can see them at 9-2. So those are some things that you want to consider too, that they may be a little more formidable of a opponent than you think. But getting back to this game, just to close out that thought, is a lot of credit goes to Jackson State defense that was able to not only stop and hinder Prairie View, but also make sure they put their offense in a good position to make sure they can score enough points where they could hold on and close out the game, winning 27-10.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see if we go back to the old Buddy Pugh with South Carolina State. The old phrase was, Buddy Pugh doesn't pass even on the interstate. And that might be his philosophy when he gets to the Celebration Bowl. And before we go to this break, Doc, I need you to write this out. I've got a homework assignment that you could give out, especially to 1876 Sports and Culture and the pregame show when you get back to the lab. And that is, of all the players on the 2 deep chart from these 2 teams that played in the championship game, How many of them played in the spring? Because I know Jackson State had a significant group of players who was able to practice, but not play in the spring because they were transferred. They transferred in. I wonder how many on Prairie View did not play in the spring, so they were on their normal body clock. I'm just curious to look into that. It's just something that came up while we were having that previous conversation. So what we gonna do here now is we gonna take a break, and when we come back, we're gonna get into the CIAA championship game. You're watching the BCSN SportsWrap with Brian and AD. Special guest Dr. Kenyatta Cavil from inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We'll be right back.
Maureen is saving big holiday shopping at Amazon. So now she's free to become Maureen the Merrier. Food is her love language. And she really loves her grandson. Like really loves.
For 200 years, Montgomery, Alabama has been making history by people who had the courage to stand up for change. Today, this riverfront city has been reborn, embracing the past and looking forward to the future. From the National Memorial for Peace and Justice to the stage of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, this is where history was and is made. We are proud to call Montgomery home, and together, we can be the change.
Supermarket sushi, really?
No. Wait, Troy, you work here?
I'm never not working. Like Head & Shoulders Scalp Shield technology, up to 100% dandruff protection, even between washes.
Never not working, huh?
Oh, Troy, you're such a good teacher.
Yeah, I know. Never not working. Never not working. Never, ever not working.
Are you serious?
Never not working. Dandruff protection that's never not working. Head & Shoulders Scalp Shield technology.
Are you?
We're back on the BCSN Sports Wrap. AD Drew here. Joining me today is special guest Dr. Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dr. Cavil, CIAA champion, Bowie State lost yesterday 41-17 to Gulf South champion Valdosta State in Valdosta, Georgia. Bowie State gave up 533 yards of total offense to a team that is arguably one of the best offensive teams in the nation, and probably we say the SWAC is the SEC of the FCS. Probably the Gulf South is the SEC of Division II, especially with their style of play and the athletes that they have. And yes, everybody notice the footprint. They're all in that southeastern portion of the United States. But getting back and breaking down some of the numbers, Valdosta State, 185 total rushing yards, 72, 348 to 149 total offense, 533 to 221. Third down efficiency, Valdosta State was 6 of 15 versus Bowie 4 of 13. They were 2 for 3 on fourth down. Bowie State was 0 for 1. Looking at some of the individual as Jerome Johnson, 14 for 28, 149, 2 touchdowns, no interception, but he was sacked. He was sacked 2 times. Khalil Wilkerson had 62 yards on 15 attempts, and leading the way in reception was Rainey Nix with 3 receptions for 50 yards, and Quincy Hall with 5 receptions for 47 yards. Defensively for Bowie State, Jordan Carter had six solos. Joshua Pryor Jordan Carter had 9 total tackles, 6 of them solo. Joshua Pryor had 6 total tackles. Jonathan Ross did have a sack on the day. So, Dr. Cavil, Bowie State, probably right now the class of Division II football for HBCUs. Just your thoughts overall on their season this year, and anything you want to throw out about this particular game.
In this particular game, I'll start there first. Tough matchup. The offense for Bowie State was not able to get anything going. It's not so much that they put their defense in bad spots in terms of turnovers and fumbles like that. They were clean on that side of it, but they couldn't get third downs. They were not able to move the ball, and I think that's what you got to do against Valdosta State. You know they're going to score. They're high-powered. They've showed that consistently. They actually put them under their average, which was pretty good. But you would have to score with them. The teams that have beaten them have been able to just really outscore them and get a couple of key plays here. You couldn't see this in the matchup. They dominated in terms of things like first downs, as you spoke of, 29-14 to give you some indication. 185 rushing yards to 72, 348 passing yards to 149, which is one of the biggest indicators. 500 yards, total yards, as you talk about 221. So for me, it was the fact that you just could not see the offense for Bowie State being able to make enough plays to put up some points to score against Valdosta, and then after a while, the games get away. But I thought the defense really played pretty well against that. For example, you just had Valdosta State was just 6 of 15 on the third down conversions, 2 of 3 on 4. So they were able to get a couple of key stops, but they were able to put some big plays on the board. So it wasn't like they consistently could walk down.
Offense against the top rated HBCU defense. Last week we had Southeastern Louisiana versus Florida A&M University. This week we have a Valdosta State versus a Bowie State. Why, as good as our defenses are, it is especially when we're playing within the HBCU sphere, why is it that these offenses at these other schools are seeming to be able to dominate us? You know, for lack of a better word, that good offense beat that good defense 2 consecutive weeks in a row.
I think the game has changed in a lot of ways. And so we used to say that defense wins championships, and that's true in terms of defenses being key and putting you in that position. But I think you can have a great defense, but that means you have to have at least solid offense. And I think that's what you've seen this year. While these offenses have been able to get it done against other HBCUs that may have had good defense or not so much, they would do that. When you run into a equally as talented team, you have to be more balanced. And I think in these cases, while you've seen the great offensive versus a great defense, what we sometimes ignore is the flip-flop of the matchup on the other side of the ball. And I think what you were showing is that you had some offenses on one side, particularly in this case, HBCUs, that were not able to do enough against the defense of the HBCUs. One thing that I've wanted to put on the table in terms of what I've seen, and I've gathered this research looking at high schools. In the state of Texas, so we can make it specific this, and this may be similar to other districts or counties across the country, particularly through the South. But in the state of Texas, we have districts. And they zone these districts into neighborhoods. And obviously, you look at the neighborhoods in terms of the financial wealth of that neighborhood. I'm not so much talking about that part of it, but oftentimes when you look at the classification is the number of students, in a classification. So in the state of Texas, the classification goes up to 6A, right? And in 6A, that means you have the largest classification. Usually when you look, right. And so at a 1A level or Division II level, if we take it back to college, usually the differential between the enrollment size institutions are smaller. So the aggregate of a HBCU playing what I refer to as a HWCU, historically white college university, the gap at that level is smaller. And we go down, if you look at NIA or go down and look at Division III, if we had them playing at that level, we don't in football at least. But as you move up, the exacerbation in terms of the population size of your school gets larger. So what does that mean in plain terminology? The larger institution means that you have a bigger pool of talent you can pick from, right? And so if I'm a 6A school, I have more talent, which means the competition to make the team is deeper. That means the competition in terms of my depth charts are bigger. Well, you take that into when you look at historically white colleges and historically Black colleges. Traditionally, when you think about historically Black colleges, and it's always been open. It's not because they won't recruit, but you also have other individuals who do not necessarily look at the opportunity to be a minority in an institution when in society they tend to be the majority. So if you're a historically Black colleges, you're going to recruit to what you know, regions you want. It's not that you won't be open, but you have a smaller pool because traditionally you're going to essentially recruit African-American or Black students, whichever term you want. That's already a small population. Now, I know that everybody likes to think that all we do is play sports. So you should have your sample size. Well, I hate to break it to you, that's not true. Plus, when you're in a smaller population, that means that your ability to navigate the best talent is not there. Well, we already know that the best talent, generally speaking, a lot of generalities here, but go with me in terms of this question is they're being recruited by Power 5. That chunk. Well, you have your next group where you're going to be fighting for those G5. They're going to take a large group of the African Americans. So you start to whittle down to see the level of talent that you're getting. And now you're facing off against FCS programs. So your sample size of what you're able to pull from talent is depleted, it's smaller. Well, we do the reverse side. You got a larger population of European Americans that are also playing sports, right? And I know some people like to think there's a difference in the talent differential. I don't believe that at all because I don't get in these hypocritical in terms of the physical masculinity things. I think there is a cultural relevance that you tend to have a lot more.
There's an economic difference.
Right, that are playing sports, certainly economics difference. But if you play sports a lot, there's a likelihood that somebody in that population is going to be pretty good, right? Versus if you have more opportunities in a different ethnic group, yeah, you're going to have some pretty good folks, but you're going to also have those that are not, and they can go on and do other things because they have the economic, as you're talking about, the opportunity to do those things. So I say all this to say that it's a challenge, and I don't think we ever look at this challenge. We just look at the naked framework of this program is FCS and we're FCS, and by definition, we're both FCS. We have similar regional areas that we look at that we should be able to compete, but we're not looking at the sample size of the population that you're recruiting towards. And so FCS, historically white colleges, they get to pull and recruit after African-American and Blacks, but they also get to recruit essentially from European American, and whites in terms of their population. So their team's a lot more diversity. So if you go back to what I was giving you, the sample size of a 6A school with a deeper pool, that means you have a deeper talent acquisition that you can get at. And I think that's a bigger explanation of why the challenges you having between HBCUs when they face up against historically white colleges. And that's not even to get into revenue distribution when we talk about the funding capabilities of African Americans that are coming out of their first generations of wealth, of trying to build wealth, and the ability to donate back should be done, but their ability to do it at the rate that you see our counterparts in terms of European Americans and whites is not there. So they tend to own the businesses. They tend to have generational wealth a lot more. So that means that they can donate back at a higher rate. So your financial gap is displaced. And we're not even talking about the federal spending of how states have minimized what they give to HBCUs than they do to historically white colleges, which means there's a desperation in terms of the difference in what that looks like in terms of participating in sports. So it's a lot to say that there's a lot more out there than what meets the eye in terms of some of the concerns you have in the simple game of playing sports, and the difference in terms of why we haven't been able to be as competitive when you get deeper into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you transitioned that, especially when you start talking about historically white colleges and minority players and everything, because that's a perfect transition into this article that I wanted to get into. When we're over time for our break, but I've got to get into this article. Bryce Witt in the HBCU Legacy Bowl. Now, some of the other quarterbacks invited to the HBCU Legacy Bowl include Juwan Carter from Norfolk State, very deserving. Aquil Glass, Alabama A&M, very deserving. Felix Harper, Alcorn State, very deserving. And I'm not saying Bryce Witt is not deserving or not. Here's the controversy with Bryce Witt's selection to the HBCU Legacy Bowl. Number one, has nothing to do with race. I want to put that out there. This has nothing to do with Bryce Witt being a European American quarterback. What it has to do with is the fact that Shawan is not at HBCU, at least from where I sit at. Shawan is not at HBCU, but Shawan, along with Spring Hill, are the only two non-HBCUs that compete in traditional HBCU conference. Spring Hill in Mobile, Alabama, who competes in the SIAC, and Shawan, who competes in the CIAA. That is the issue number one, and the question is, because they play an HBCU schedule, they compete in the HBCU conference, they have a 56% minority enrollment, African-American enrollment at their university. Should they be eligible as a team and individually for HBCU awards? I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it right there. We know they're eligible for CIAA, whatever, but on a national level, should we recognize Shawan? And if we recognize Shawan, we have to recognize Bryce Witt. No doubt about it. But if we don't recognize Shawan, do we recognize Bryce Witt because he has competed against African Americans as a 4-year starter at Shawan? And 2 of those 4 years, they were full-time members in the CIAA conference. I've talked too long, Doc. Please help me out here.
Well, I'll keep this pretty simple. I go back, what are your guidelines? Are your guidelines that say that an individual that plays in what many people would refer to as a historically Black college conference, is that the rule? Or is the rule referencing that an individual has to play for a historically Black college? Well, I have at least quoted what the HBC Legacy Bowl states, and they have the right to change it, but And so maybe they've changed it since they've written the original rule, which people amend their bylaws all the time. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the bylaws, as quoted, says the HBCU Legacy Bowl, quote, is a postseason all-star game showcasing the best NFL draft eligible football players from historically Black colleges and universities. I'll ask you, is Shawan designated by the federal government as a historically Black college?
No.
So based on the rules that they gave me, the statement they made, then if you're not from a HBCU, a historically Black college, then you're not eligible.
If you look at the black and white of it, the debate is over right there. If you look at the black and white, forget all the thinking and layman's term and barbershop talk and all that stuff. Just based on that black and white that you just read to me, we can go to break. But it's more. It seems like it's more to it than that, though, Doc.
Yeah, I'm sure people can look at it in different ways and break it down, and I'm fine with that. And I would be like, I would say you make a great point. But, you got to remember, as a professor, academic professor, I asked you to read documents for the framing, or when I do journalistic articles, I'm simply talking about putting the guidelines and the facts in front of me. So for me, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to waste a lot of time and energy creating an argument if I know the baseline of the guidelines. Again, it's an organization. They have every right to amend their bylaws if this is part of their bylaws in terms of what they want to do. If they've done that, that's fine. It changes everything in the statement of argument. All I'm reading is what they state. So I'm not sure why there's a big, robust debate about this. Again, I'll read it one more time. Maybe I misread it. It says the HBCU Legacy Bowl, quote, is a postseason all-star game showcasing the best NFL draft-eligible football players from historically Black colleges and universities, end quote. It didn't add in historically Black conferences. It didn't add in historically white colleges or Native American institutions, minority serving institutions, or institutions that have large African American Black populations as eligible to participate in their game. If they put all that in there, I'd be like, what's the problem? They say clearly in the statement that this individual is eligible. Based on this, the individual is not eligible. Again, it's not my game. I'm not going to boycott it or anything like that, but you asked me a simple statement. I'm just saying that's what your guidelines say. So I'm confused.
So do you have a problem with him participating in the game from Shawan University? Just Dr. Cavil. Does Dr. Cavil have an issue with it?
No, I don't have an issue with it. I mean, it's their event, it's whatever. If you ask me what is their rules, I'm gonna tell you what the rule is. But in terms of whether I have a problem with it, no, it's not this is not my game. I'm not making money off this. I'm not researching this. It's no sweat off my back. They can do what they want to do. I'm just saying that's what the rules say.
My thing is, if he's played against Black competition, pretty much.
Yeah, but if you say that, that means anybody from any historically white college should be eligible. Most folks, we know the rules are that 60% of African Americans are playing sports. So
they play a HBCU football schedule every season.
Correct. So they need to amend the rules that say, and if you play a majority of historically Black college university schedule, you're eligible.
And I wonder if this debate would have went on if this game would have come around in 2019 and Ryan Stanley from a Florida A&M was invited. Because in theory, just in theory, you're thinking HBCU, you're thinking Black players, and you've got a white quarterback, as Ryan Stanley was for Florida A&M.
Well, I think
quarterback.
That would be different to me, is if they specifically said that this is for minorities or African American athletes.
There are people out there who are going to make that argument, Doc. That's why I bring it up.
I think
I didn't say you and I would make that argument.
No, I agree with you. I would just think they would be disingenuous, so they'd be misleading in regards to that. I'm simple. As I said, it's a statement. Follow the statement. We don't have to get into this big filibuster, emotional feel. I know y'all like to be debatable and all this and critique and all these fancy things. If you did this and you were in my class and you had these guidelines, I'd give you an F squared because you didn't follow the guidelines. It's pretty simple. Black and white. Either you follow the guidelines or you don't. I'm grading based on this premise. You can't come back and give me a paper and say, well, I thought I wanted to do it like this. I'd be like, this is a great paper. You didn't follow the rules. So that means you get an F squared. Change the rules. Change the statement. Update it. I'm not my fault. You wrote that.
Well, it says
I said last time, and then I'm ready to go to break. I had no more statement because I just want to make sure that y'all understand that I can read and I'm not crazy. The HBCU Legacy Bowl, quote, is a postseason all-star game showcasing the best NFL draft-eligible football players from historically Black colleges and universities. I ask you again, is Shawan an HBCU?
No.
All right, what? No more debate. I'm finished. Next, take a break.
Says doctor hurt my feelings and maybe go see if I'm still eligible to use the withdrawal policy at school. We get ready to go to break while I do that research on the withdrawal policy. You're watching the BCSN Sports Wrap with Brian and AD, special guest Dr. Kenyatta Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We'll be right back.
Looking for authentic Caribbean food like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
So we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door, tell your mama hungry.
Charmin Ultra Soft has so much cushiony softness, it's hard for your family to remember they can use less.
Sweet pillows of softness.
This is soft.
Holy Charmin. Oh, excuse me. Roll it back, everybody.
Sorry.
Charmin Ultra Soft is so cushiony soft, you'll want more. But it's so absorbent, you can use less. So it's always worth it.
Now, what did we learn about using less?
You gotta roll it back, everybody.
We all go. Why not enjoy the go with Charmin?
It's...
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. AD Drew over in the big chair because Brian Fulford is not here today. So joining me in chair two is Dr. Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Before I go any further, Doc, tell everybody already know where to find you and all that stuff, but I still like to give you an opportunity to talk about yourself. Go ahead, tell everybody.
You're sure right, because I'm sure y'all have many viewers that we don't have, and we'd love for them to come over there and check us out on Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. That's Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We do a show every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we also do a wrap-up show on Sunday at 9 a.m. before you leave for church or get into the rest of your morning. And so check us out. We talk about all things HBCU, what I call the sporting HBCU diaspora, HBCU sports culture. And as you heard early in the show, we also talk about the business of sports.
And it's not too often that get on here and really get deep into the business side of it. You know, Brian and I do a lot of game analysis, but we do take our time and try to get into the business aspect sometimes. But when I've got Dr. Cavil here, I'm going to take this opportunity to get deeper into the business of sports. Be it Dr. Cavil's show, be it our show. Like, subscribe, share, download, and donate. I'm not gonna go through the big speech Mariah does. I'm gonna make it as simple as possible. All right, Dr. Cavil, as we get ready to close this show out, I did want to bring up this one thing, and I'll just read this verbatim. But this is from per HBCU Game Day. This article actually came out on Friday. I missed it. I just came across it today. The Birmingham squadron of the G League announced on Friday that the team has inked a partnership with Miles College to become the official HBCU partner of the Birmingham squadron. Miles College, a leading historical Black college in Fairfield, Alabama, which is a suburb of Birmingham, for those who do not know, will work with the squadron to give students hands-on experience working in sports business in order to develop the next generation of leaders in the industry. And the Birmingham squadron are affiliated with the New Orleans Pelicans of the NBA. Just thought I would throw that in also. Dr. Cavil, your thoughts on this historic partnership?
I think it's fascinating, the opportunity, at least in terms of what I could read. I'd love to get a little more backstory in terms of some of the particulars about how this is really going to play out. But from a surface level of what I can tell, the natural mix between the HBCU and the G League, particularly for students and their ability to get involvement in terms of what we would call sport management or simply the business of sport, is significant, because every time you open those doors for individuals to get an opportunity to find a career and it's something that they may love, I think that's great. So that perspective, I'm all on board. I'm interested to see, I couldn't tell from this article, are they going to get to use the facility there? In terms of sharing a facility, where are the actual games going to be played? That would be information. That would be interesting to me. And if they are they providing some financial support in terms of, like, quote unquote, renting the facility if they're using it? That would obviously be even more beneficial because you would get the income off of it.
Yeah. Well, the facility that the Birmingham squadron is going to play in, this is not in this article, but I know this from having dealt with the Birmingham area and being from Alabama, is the Legacy Arena, which is formerly the BJCC, Birmingham Jefferson County Convention Center. And that is the former home of University of Alabama, Birmingham, where they used to play their basketball games at. UAB built a on-campus arena.
Bartow Arena, is it still called
Bartow Arena? Legacy Arena, as it's now called, is the home of the AHSAA, Alabama High School Athletic Association, basketball finals. So that's arena's, one of the arena's events that they have there. That arena is about 15-20 minutes from Miles campus. There is a secondary arena that's also owned by the city of Birmingham. Fair Park Arena. It's changed its name. I don't know what the new name is, but we've called it Fair Park Arena. It's an older arena that is about 3 miles from Miles's campus. And they have played some satellite games there. I know that's normally where Tuskegee and Miles played at, because Miles on-campus arena was not big enough to hold that basketball game, for instance. So I don't know. That would be good, but I don't think that would be good for the Miles fan base to consistently play games at that particular arena because of the distance from its core fan base to downtown Birmingham. And then, of course, you know, when you get downtown in any city, you got to deal with the parking, you got to deal with the traffic and all the other things that come from being downtown. So yeah, it would be good, as it's a smaller arena. I believe I think it may seat for basketball 10 to 12,000. So it's not a huge arena, but obviously you'd like the intimacy of being on campus if you can, or in the satellite arena, which Fair Park Arena, which I think seats 8,000 if I remember correctly. Been a few years since I've been into that.
You talk about the Barlow Arena, as history would have it, 19 years ago, this month, if you would, 2 days from now, I created the inaugural Heritage Basketball Invitational Classic, which featured Alabama A&M Bulldogs versus South Carolina State. And the Division II matchups. The headline matchup was Miles College Bears versus Benedict College Tigers of the SIC. So I'm familiar with that area and history in that. So it's fascinating to see how these things shake up and come around. Thought I would sneak that in there and share that a little bit for those who don't realize how long I've really been working at this craft and been in the business and done it for so many different angles. So,
well, it'd be nice if we could get another one of the basketball classics started back up in a few of these cities.
Well, we got the hidden brains of this operation in the background a lot, and that's Roy Evans, and he's given me some latitude to help work on put these things together. So he's working feverishly to try to make those things happen. So I'd love to see, what that work looks like. I've gained so much more of the background to probably help to see how you facilitate something like that. It's a challenge. But back to your original point in terms of what this looks like. Again, I think the relationship is good, and I think you're exactly right. Be interested in maybe they could even at least come over and maybe practice on campus or something to kind of create relationships of what that looks like. How do you govern a practice for those that want to be around it? Certainly the fact that they get to go and students go over there to work at the facility, again, to see different operations of what it looks like in a sporting environment. I have a friend over there, so big time Miles College Bear alumni and fan, obviously. He always gives me a check and checks on me in terms of that. I know he would be in it, but he's told me that the Miles College has some interest in looking at maybe bringing in sports management, asked me to look and consider doing some consulting work about developing their curriculum, and certainly I'm open to that. But even with that said, I think this opportunity, even from the business students that are in the business schools to look at that, is a great opportunity. So you to make the best of it. And so I think it'll be fascinating to see how this culminates and how this moves forward.
All right. We're getting ready to get out of here. Just a couple things. Doc, football is over. Now it's time to shift gears. Got basketball, indoor track, swimming, a few other things that's going on to occupy our time. A couple points I wanted to bring out about basketball. Look at the NAIA and look at what some of our teams are doing in the NAIA. Talladega's men and women, top 10 in the nation. Stillman, men, just outside the top 10 in NAIA. Langston's women with Ashika Alexander, who was signed as a free agent with the Minnesota Lynx and came back to college, off to a 9-2 start. In the SIAC, you've got Miles women 6-0. You've got Tuskegee women 4-1. You've got Benedict women 6-3. SIAC women going to take a big it's going to be big. Looking over on the men's side of the SIAC. Benedict 5-3 on the east side. Miles only played a couple of games, but I have seen Miles play. They will be a force to reckon with in the SIAC. Moving over to some of the CIAA teams. And it's amazing when you look at the CIAA. It seems like the schools that are down in football always excel at basketball. Looking at the women's side, Elizabeth City. Hey, didn't know anything about them in football. Look at their men and women basketball. Johnson C. Smith, once again, women's basketball. Another one of those schools that was not doing too good in football, but really standing out in basketball. On the men's side, you got a Virginia State at 5-2, Elizabeth City at 4-2, Winston-Salem at 6-2. Anybody in the big boys you wanted to bring out, Doc, before we get out of here?
In terms of the mid-major, I think you covered that pretty extensively. I think it's interesting in how for the longest we thought CIAA was a basketball conference, SIAC was a football conference, and it seems to some degree that may be flipping in terms of sports, certainly in terms of what we've seen Bowie State do, as they will, in football, will have be at the top of the list, obviously win so many different people's mid-major division championship, which would be the third in 4 years, and the only reason it's not 4 in 4 years is the fact they didn't have a 2020 season. So that's 3 consecutive championships it looks like they will take home in terms of the best HBCU mid-major football programs. I like to talk about it. But flipping back to basketball, your original question you look at, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting season for the SIAC and CIAA. I would say in terms of the mid-major programs to keep your eyes on, in the MEAC right now, it is Norfolk State. They're running away with it, 9 wins. It looked like they were going to tip off and get their 10th win, but they had a shot at the buzzer against a rival in Hampton. They got a little payback when they were got beat up in the Phoenix Classic out there. And so they did take that L the other day. So I'm interested to see what Hampton does. Quietly, Howard is playing some good basketball. They got a couple of Division I wins. Morgan State, they kind of looked like they were playing some basketball. They did run into the buzzsaw, Grambling in that Chris Carter in terms of the basketball classic they had up there in Phoenix, there in terms of that. But in terms of the SWAC, I'm fascinated to see what Southern has done. They've had 3 Division I wins quietly. Jackson State has had 2 Division I wins on this early season. Alcorn State, that people need to keep their eyes on. Former assistant coach down there at Prairie View is getting it done in a lot of ways for the Braves, as they've gotten 2 Division I wins. So I'm always interested as you play this non-conference, the unequal schedules, but you see teams come in 0-8, 0-7, which Texas Southern and Prairie View that are predicted on the men's side to be at the top of the race in terms of what that looks like, along with Jackson State. Texas Southern and Prairie View haven't got a win on the season. They play these arduous non-conference schedules, but they usually are able to eke out a win or 2. They haven't done that yet. So I'm fascinated to see what that may mean as you get into the season. And so that's what I see going on there. Obviously, Tennessee State has had a rough go of it on the men's side, as they have played a respectable schedule. Particularly, I like what they've done in terms of the HBC matchups, but they haven't been able to really get any W's in that. As they're 0-2 against the SWAC, 0-1 against the MEAC in terms of what that looks like. Lost to Chicago State, which is not an HBCU, but in terms of the population would be a historically Black college in terms of minority serving institution. So I'm continuing fascinated to kind of see if they can get over the hump. Obviously, Percy Miller, which was a big off-season recruiting, particularly with the son of Master P, he's out for the season. North Carolina A&T thought that they may have been able to get some stuff done in non-conference. They got a win, a couple of wins, Division I wins, but they haven't just been a world beaters. It'll be interesting. Can they settle down and get in conference play? And then obviously Hampton, we talked about. You always got to look at their program with the coach there. They get it done. On the women's side, Hampton is still back in the business. Norfolk State is doing really well. And then on the women's side in the SWAC, you see some teams struggling. But it'd be interesting to see when they get in conference play besides Jackson State. Jackson State has got a couple of wins, but they're looking good in terms of seeing if they can repeat. 4-3. Yeah, and so UAP has quietly got a couple of Division I wins. And they started off hot last year. Can they continue that streak? And as they get into conference play, can they actually keep it up this year? I'll be interested to see what that looks like in terms of them turning around. So that's kind of my Division I basketball. I really don't get into Division I basketball until January, but this is the perfect week that you do start to turn your eye to basketball in terms of men's and women's, because you got that week off before you get to the conclusion, the official conclusion, if you would, of the HBCU football season in the Celebration Bowl. So it'll be interesting to sneak some of that in. So I'm glad that you looked at basketball, both as you see in earnest play, the SIC, CIAA Division II teams are getting into conference race, but you're starting to see a little more action at the Division I level as well, as they start to be preparing to get in their conference races late December and early January.
Yeah. Morgan State, Beverly Shore, Howard, Coppin women, all 500 or better early on in the season. And next week, hopefully we'll get into some indoor track, because it is track season also. And I love me some track. want to thank Dr. Kenyatta Cavil for co-hosting with me today. We've got to get out of here, make way for BJ Jones to come in with Inside HBCU Football. Once again, Doc, tell them where to find them at. Tell them where they can watch at quickly.
Yes, you can find me on social media platforms. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. That's DrKenyattacavil. Again, that's DrKenyattacavil. All the fans out there that supported me this week in Jackson, Mississippi, just want to shout out. Appreciate you supporting the show. Like, subscribe. Make sure you download my JBN as we continue to do the work for you. My BCSN, download. We need the support. We want the support. Like and subscribe inside the HBCU Sports Lab on YouTube and Facebook. And let's get it done and support my partners right here, as I'm sure Drew will let you know where you can find the rest of it. I can't wait to see what BJ Jones has to say in the next hour.
Anything Black College Sports Network related, you can follow us on social media at BCSN and the number 1 at BCSN and the number 1. My producer is in my ear, so I'm going to get ready to get us out of here. You can follow me online at BCSN Drew, at BCSN DREW. You can catch my partner Brian Fulford on Twitter at DRB365. So for Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, producer Roy Evans behind the scene, and my partner Brian Fulford, who could not be here today, this is AD Drew. Hope y'all have a good week, good night, and we don't do course lecture dismiss here, Doc. We just say we'll holler.
But